Right now, we are doing a series of messages on the 10 Commandments. And so these were given to Moses and the Israelites in the wilderness, about 3,200 years ago, something like that. And these 10 Commandments have changed the world in profound and dramatic ways. And we're looking at one each week. And if you've been here for a while, which commandment are we up to today? Number 5. Yeah, commandment number 5. Commandment number 5. And commandment number 5 is the commandment to honor your father and your mother. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but we start off each message with an illustration. So a little story or connection or illustration example that will help us later on in the message take what the Bible is saying and put it into practice in our own lives. So here's my illustration for today. The illustration is about me and my doctor. Now, this is not my doctor. This is a stock photo of some doctor, but this guy actually looks a lot like my doctor, except my doctor, has a much better beard than this guy. Much bigger, much better. But this guy actually looks quite a lot like my doctor. So shout out to Dr. Thind, probably not watching this, but maybe, who knows. So one time I'm at the doctor. This was a number of years ago. And I had to have a minor procedure. Doesn't matter what the procedure was. It was just one of those things you just do at the doctor's office, right? But it was a little bit painful. And the procedure took about 5 minutes, something like that, maybe 7 minutes. And so as the doctor is doing the procedure, I think his initial, how doctors, if they have a good kind of bedside manner, they'll try to distract you from things like needles and pain and things like that. So I think he knows I'm a pastor, and so I think he did this just to distract me. He first asked, what I was teaching on at that time. And actually, at that time, I had been teaching and doing some Bible studies on the 10 Commandments. And so I said, I'm teaching on the 10 Commandments. And so he immediately honed in on this idea of father and honoring your father and mother. And he asked, we're in the middle of this procedure, so I'm in pain. And he asks, do I need to honor my father? Do I need to forgive him? And he tells me, so here's the deal, just really quickly. Again, the whole thing is 7 minutes long. He tells me, so my father and I have had this conflicted relationship. He abandoned me when I was a kid. Basically, he's a terrible father. I knew him a little bit as an adult, but I pretty much am still bitter and angry at him after all these years. He's about to die. Should I forgive him? Pastor. And also, hold still, and this is going to hurt, he says to me. So I'm like, okay, what is happening right now? But I recognize that this is a moment where, God has prepared this moment. And so, I waited until I wasn't in extreme pain, but I thought about what I was going to say, and I carefully responded to my doctor. And I'll tell you what I said at the end of the message. So you got to pay attention. You got to pay attention to the whole message. While I was in pain in this procedure, how did I respond to, you could, spoiler alert, Jesus says you got to forgive everyone. So is he supposed to forgive his father? Yes, but I said more than just that. So we'll come back to that in a minute. So should I honor my father? Should I forgive him? Should I forgive my dad? So this series, 10 Commandments, the subtitle of the series is Foundations of the World. And we are thinking of these 10 Commandments in a particular way. They are, in a very real sense, they are and reveal the foundations of the world, the way that life really works. Not just the way even it should work, but the way that if you violate these 10 Commandments, if you don't live according to them, life will not work. Just like if you break the rules of physics, you will crash into the ground, right? Same thing in the spiritual world. If you live in opposition to the way God really made human relationships, spiritual relationship with him to function, you will crash and burn in a different way. So they are, in a very real sense, the foundation of the world. They are not just rules that God came up with randomly. They are principles that govern the universe. They reveal who God really is at a deep level, and therefore what reality is like. Principles that govern the universe, they're the way the Lord intended human life to operate. and the only way it operates well. So we've said we're up to honor your parents, and this is the 5th commandment. So let's see if you can remember what the other commandments are. What's commandment number 1? Worship the Lord your God only, right? Only worship the Lord. Commandment number 2 is do not make idols or images, right? Commandment number 3 is do not misuse the name of the Lord your God. So the first 3 very clearly and particularly about God himself, right? How are you going to relate to God? And even the fourth one is what? Do you remember that? Remember the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day, rest day. And there's a lot that's very deep. All of these are actually very deep. But to understand that one is quite deep. I go back and look at last week's message on YouTube or wherever else we have it if you would like to know more about that. And then the 5th one is honor your parents. And we've said, this is it. We'll read it first. It's very short. And we're going to get to all the short commandments now. So the last one, number 4, is the longest one as it's written. And then this one, it has a little bit of link to it. After this, it's going to get very short, right? The 6th one is, thou shalt not murder. Do not murder. And then do not commit adultery. Do not steal. So they're going to get very short. But every single one of these commands, we've said this before, there is a sort of a surface level to them that is very simple and straightforward. Don't do this. Or for a couple of them, do this. But each of these commands is incredibly deep. Incredibly deep. Even when we get to next week, you might think, okay, don't murder. That's pretty straightforward. It is. And there is a world of evil that is behind murder. And that's what the command is really getting at. But this command, you can probably see right off the bat if you just think for a minute about what our relationships are like with our parents and our children. This commandment is very deep. It's very deep. And this one, a little bit different than some of the others in a number of ways. Most of them have a very simple application. Most of them, not all of them. But most of them, don't murder. Okay, the simple surface level thing is, don't plan to kill this other person and then kill them, right? So it's obvious what you should not do in that case. Or don't make idols. Don't make images of God. It's very obvious what the surface level command is saying to do. This one is a little bit trickier. What exactly does it mean? What does it look like to honor your father and your mother? It actually looks different at different stages of life. It looks different depending on who your father and your mother are and what they're like. So this command is going to take a little bit more work for us to understand exactly what to do with it. Now, this image that I used, I've only talked about this image that I've used for the sermon graphic. I've only talked about it in one of the messages. This is actually a tablet of the 10 Commandments, written in archaic Hebrew. And this was found in the north of Israel. It is not like one of the original tablets of the 10 Commandments. It's not that. But it is very old. This particular one, remember I said the 10 Commandments are about 3,200 years old. This one is about 1,500, maybe 1,600 years old, something like that. So it's not nearly as old as the actual 10 Commandments. But it does give us some sense of maybe what these tablets looked like. Right? This one in particular was on top of a synagogue, Jewish synagogue. So as you walked into the synagogue, and it's big, it's about as wide as maybe a little bit narrower than this TV, but longer, so vertical. So maybe if you turned the TV vertical and made it a little bit bigger, something like that. And it is actually all 10 Commandments on just one tablet. The original tablets of the 10 Commandments, we can tell just from the plural, how many tablets were there? There were 2. And so if there were 2 tablets and 10 commandments, how many commandments were on each tablet? Well, the Bible doesn't say, but it'd be pretty weird if it were not 5 and 5, right? It's very likely that it was 5 and 5 on each tablet, even though the first 5 commandments have a lot more words than the second 5 commandments. That's probably why the tablets had to be written front and back. Very likely the first 5 commandments were one tablet, but they were on the front and the back of the piece of stone. That is, there's lots of details in the section in Exodus where it tells us about the 10 Commandments being given. There's lots of details that Moses left for us. And that partly is to show for all of us today that was something that really happened to Moses. He really did climb Mount Sinai 3,000 years ago. And God really did descend on that mountain in smoke and fire. And those first tablets were engraved in stone, not by Moses, but directly by God himself in some miraculous way. So they were written in archaic Hebrew, which is what's on these tablets. So if the first tablet had the first 5 commandments, then that means 5 commandments on each tablet, and we are on commandment number 5 today. That means we are closing the first tablet. That means this is the last commandment on the first tablet. And it's interesting, if you look at those commandments, I won't bring them all up on the screen again, but the commandments on the first tablet seem to have to do with God himself, with the Lord. The commandments on the second tablet, which we'll get to, seem to have to do, or all of them do have to do, with how you relate to other people, right? Don't murder other people. Don't commit adultery with other people. Don't steal from other people. Don't commit perjury or false testimony against other people. Don't covet or be jealous, try to get stuff from other people. They're all about other people. The ones on this tablet are all about the Lord, except kind of for this one. This commandment actually forms a kind of a bridge. On the surface, it is about how we relate to other people, but not just all other people, not any other people, particular other people. Specifically, your father and your mother. And most people who have thought about this deeply and looked at, what does the whole Bible say about this, the reason it belongs on that first tablet is that the relationship you have with your father and your mother, and, conversely, if you are a parent, the relationship you have with your children is so deep. It's so close to your identity, so close to who you are, that really how you relate to them is intertwined with how you relate to God himself. You will not be able, in a deeper way, even than the other commandments that will come later, you will not be able to worship the Lord properly, trust him, if you don't accept and honor your father and your mother. So that's part of why it belongs on the first tablet. There are some other commands there's one other command in particular, there's just a reminder on that first tablet, that has to do with relationships between parents and children and throughout the generations. This command about worshiping idols, actually, the second commandment, has this, we talked about this a few weeks ago, has this sort of generational curse and blessing to it. That somehow what we do, how we relate to the Lord, somehow that the results, the consequences of that can get passed down to future generations. And so even though the first tablet is about relating directly to the Lord, we can see here, once again, it's all intertwined. How we relate to the Lord, how we relate to the people closest to us, and then even to the wider world around us, those things are all tied up together. So we're going to approach this commandment and kind of unpack it in 3 parts. First, we will look at what it means for children, because I've already said this commandment has a different application depending on your stage of life and depending on who and how your parents really are. Has a different look to how it's applied. So we're going to talk about what it means to honor your parents. We'll first start by talking about what it means for children. And even though the children are gone, right, we've kicked them all out, we're going to talk about what children should do. This is going to be an application point for us because we were all children once. And it's going to help us understand how we progress through life and, how we should have honored our parents then and how we should be honoring our parents now. It'll also help us understand how to relate to our children if we are parents. Okay? So then we'll move from that into talking about what it looks like for adults to honor their parents, because the commandment in Exodus is not written to children. Now, it includes children, but it is a command for everyone. Honor your father and mother is not just directed to children. It's directed to all human beings. Well, what if? What if I'm a grown-up? Yep, it's for you. What if my parents aren't alive anymore? Yep, it's for you. It's for everyone, every human being. And then the third part, we'll look at the promise, because as you'll see highlighted here in a minute, this commandment has a promise attached to it. And there's a question. Why? Why is it that if I honor my parents, that is going to help me live a long and abundant life on the earth? What is the connection there? And there are actually several connections. So we'll look at how that flows. So first section, children. All right, now there is another place in the Bible where the fifth commandment, honor your father and mother, is reiterated. It's said again. And in this case, it's explained some by the Apostle Paul in the book of Ephesians. It's explained some, and it's explained in particular for children. So in this part of Ephesians, which is a letter written to the church, the Apostle Paul is writing. He's written to masters and slaves. He's written to men. He's written to women. He writes to parents, and he also tells children how they should behave. And this is what he says. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for that is right. So children should obey their parents. And then he quotes the fifth commandment, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. He highlights this fact that there's a promise attached to it. So that it may go well with you. That's again from Exodus. So that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy a long life on the earth. Okay? So he then, kids don't think this is unfair. He is about to, the next thing he does is tell parents what to do. So there's a command for parents as well. And if you don't know, that commandment is don't exasperate your children. Don't exasperate them. But let's dig into this and see what does it mean, because this is the most straightforward, what does it mean for children? What does it look like for children to honor their father and their mother? What does that look like? Well, the Apostle Paul tells us it looks like obedience. It looks like obeying your parents, because that is the right thing to do. And notice he says, he doesn't just say obey your parents. He's basically saying for children, what it looks like to honor your parents, to follow that commandment, for children that looks like obeying your parents in the Lord. What does it mean to obey your parents in the Lord? Well, it means a couple of things. First of all, it means that you are doing it for the Lord. So if you're a kid and you're saying to yourself, because there are some who are here, maybe watching online, maybe there are some actual younger children watching online. I don't know if you're able to follow this. But there are some here who are still teenagers, right? So what is not addressed in the Bible is this kind of progression, right? It's not so clear in our society as it was in theirs who's a kid and who's an adult, right? In their society, there was a time when, boom, you became an adult. But even for them, there was some level of progression. For us today, you're a toddler, and then you're a child, then you're an older child, then you're a preteen, then you're a teen, then you're a young adult. When do you become a real grown-up? What's your answer? I don't know, right? I think we would say 18, 19, but probably most 18 and 19-year-olds feel like they're not real grown-ups in our society. They feel like they still have some step to take, most of them. So it actually is quite a progression in our society, so it's not super clear-cut. But we can look at the extremes, okay? And what it's saying here is obey your parents in the Lord means for the purpose of following the Lord. So if you're here today and you don't feel fully like a grown-up, or you are younger, right? Or you're watching online, and you might think, okay, obey your parents. Well, what about when my parents are wrong? Okay, what about when my parents tell me to do something that's just totally ridiculous, and I know I'm really right, and they're just too old, and they don't know the right way? Well, we'll get to, unless they're telling you to do something that's actually evil, which is very rare. It's very rare, probably never happens for most of us in here. You are going to obey them, even if you think it's not the best thing. Like you have a better idea than your parents. If you're a child still living under their authority, you're going to obey them and trust God to take care of you. Trust, you're going to do it not because your parents are right, not because they explained it to you and convinced you, but you're going to obey them because God placed you in this relationship. And so you're going to trust that God knows what he's doing, even if your parents don't, or you think they don't. And you're going to obey your parents in the Lord. Now, I'll tell you, there's one other thing that is meant here by in the Lord, and that is there are some extreme cases. This command to obey your parents is not unlimited. Now, for most of us grew up with well-intentioned parents who never told us to do anything really evil, right? They might have told us to do things we didn't like clean up your room. Oh, my parents are so evil. No, they're not. But there are some people in the world, and maybe even some people watching today, who had their parents teach them or tell them to do things that are really, truly wrong. And in that case, even for children, you see this command is not unlimited. It's kind of like the command to obey the law of the country that you live in, right? This is a command. A couple times in the Bible, it says, obey the authorities who are over your nation. Well, if they tell you to murder people, should you obey them? No, of course not. Same thing with parents, right? Even if you are a child, if your parents are telling you to do something that is legitimately evil, like a direct violation, let's say, of some of the other 10 commandments, you're not to obey them in that. You're still supposed to honor them, which shows us that there is a difference between honoring our parents and obeying them. A huge difference, okay? So this is what it means for children to honor their parents. We can write down a couple things if you want. Children honor their parents by obeying, okay? It's not totally unlimited. It's for the purpose of following after God, trusting God. But children honor their parents by obeying. And if you are a parent, especially of young children, you must teach your children to obey you. You must. If you don't do that, they will be missing huge parts of what was supposed to be built into their character. When children are very young, like I said, there's a progression, but when children are very young, they cannot understand the reasons why they have to obey. And our society more and more has become a society that is so open that it doesn't even teach children, young children, to obey. And this is something we must do. But let's move into the second piece, and this is adults, right? So now we've talked about children. It's very straightforward, simple, at least for young children. Children are going to obey. But what about as we get older? Do preteens always have to obey their parents? What should the relationship look like? What about teenagers? What about young adults? Okay, now what about when you're a real grown-up? I'm just curious, how many in the room would say that so many people in our society, even older people, say they don't feel like real grown-ups? How many would say they feel like a real grown-up? No one, just me. It's just me. I would tell you, I felt like a real grown-up in my head since I was about 5 years old. I don't know why. I just always have. I always have. When people have said that, I feel like a kid. I'm like, what are you talking about? I left that behind when I was 4 and a half. So I don't know. I wasn't a real grown-up when I was 5, but I felt like it. So many of you, even though you don't feel like it, I got to tell you today, you are real grown-ups. If you have a job, if you earn your own money, if you have children, if you are even, at that stage where you don't think your parents should be dictating everything that you do, then you are a real grown-up, standing on your own merits before society, other people, and the Lord. Standing on what you decide to do, okay? So I know more of you really believe you're grown-ups than raised your hands, I hope. We'll have deep Bible studies about that later. Okay, so what if you're an adult? What then? What does honoring your parents mean, and what's the right way to do it? I would say there are a number of things here, and I'm going to go through a whole bunch of points here. a whole bunch of points that are ways that we can honor the Lord, ways that we can honor our parents, honor the Lord by honoring our parents and fulfilling this commandment. And they are connected, many of them, to the easiest to understand, right? How children are supposed to obey their parents. But as we get older, we are not supposed to obey our parents anymore. In fact, if you are fully an adult, or even in a stage where you're supposed to fully be an adult, I will go as far as to say we could call it a commandment. Not one of the 10 commandments perhaps, but it would be a legitimate Bible-based command to say, you shall not obey your parents. Now, that doesn't mean that you're never going to take your parents' advice if you're an adult. Okay, and it does depend where you're at in that spectrum, that progression. But full adults should not be doing things just because their parents tell them to. There are people who get stuck in that all the way until when their parents die. Now, if you're honoring your parents, are you going to listen to your parents' advice? Of course you are, right? You're going to take that in, you're going to think about it, you're going to pray. There's lots of ways you're going to honor your parents, and you want to live the right way, but the decisions to do those things are going to be your own as a full adult. Now, if you're in the middle somewhere, it depends, right? It depends how much authority your parents still have over you in your life. So there are some of you who are going to be teenagers and having struggles with your parents, or young adults who are still living at home. And in those cases, there are some times when you're going to be making your own decisions, and sometimes when you're just going to have to obey your parents, even if you don't want to, if you are still under their authority in some way. So it is somewhat complicated. But some straightforward things we can say in general about what it looks like to honor your parents as an adult. And this is what we all need to be progressing into, no matter where we're at, is adults honor their parents by living the right way. So the pattern here is that as parents, the parents are teaching their children. Hopefully the parents are following the Lord, trying to do better themselves. And then they're teaching their children when they're young to obey the Lord. And as their children get older, you want to see your children decide to do that for themselves. And so as adults, one of the primary ways we can honor our parents, especially if our parents really tried to teach us the right thing, which most of them did, we can honor our parents by living the right way, by taking the good lessons from their lives and putting those things into practice. Now, what if your parents didn't teach you the right way, or what if your parents made huge mistakes in their lives? Well, they all did, okay? Everyone makes mistakes, and we'll get to more of that later. But everyone can take some lessons from their parents, and many can take, even if your parents didn't follow the Lord, you can still honor them and who God has called them to be by living the right way, living the way that the Bible teaches you. This is the next verse, which I already gave you a spoiler for. But you see in Ephesians, where we read that letter from Paul, it's closely connected, right? How you're supposed to obey your parents is closely connected with what you are then going to do as parents later on. This word fathers, it is literally the word fathers, but in ancient languages that also incorporates mothers as well. So this could easily be translated parents. Parents, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So you're going to live the right way and pass on what you've learned. That's one way to honor your parents. Honor your parents by raising your children well in the same pattern, hopefully the same pattern that you receive from your parents, or in the pattern that you receive from the Bible, which your parents should have followed. Another way that we can honor our parents, really simple as adults, is we can honor our parents by listening to them. And as we've already said, this does not mean, I'm not suggesting that you obey them, but you should definitely listen to them. Here is a verse that you might think is written to children, but it's not. This verse is actually written primarily in Proverbs for all adults, maybe even we could say primarily for young adults, but really for all adults. And here's what it says: listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. I think we can pull a few things out of this. First, the listening, right? There are things, no matter how, if your parents were really, really good parents or maybe not so good or even bad parents, there are things that your parents tried to teach you, things that God really was trying to speak into your life through them that you can pull out and take and will benefit your life immensely. Listening to your father, many of us live a long way from our parents. Sometimes as adults, it can be difficult to be around your parents. You know, as a pastor, I have a kind of a closer view into a lot of different human lives and families than many people have. You have a close view into your own family and maybe a few people who are close to you. I can tell you that every family is dysfunctional in some way. Every family is dysfunctional in some way. That's part of sin. And many, many people, not all people, but many, many people struggle in some ways to relate to and be around their parents. Even in good relationships between parents and children. And so one of the things you can actively do to honor your parents is, even if it's hard to talk to them and listen to them, you know, like maybe you feel like you can't get a word in when you're around your parents and they just talk the whole time. That's a common pattern. You can still honor them by listening to them, by making sure you call them and hang out with them. I mean, these are very straightforward things. It doesn't mean you have to let them control your life. You don't. You should not. But, if they're trying. But you should listen to them. And the second half of this, and this is one of those, it's sort of Hebrew poetry, where they say the same thing twice, but in a little bit different way. Do not despise your mother when she is old. And I think that the way that this is phrased is huge for our society today. Many of us have this idea in our society, because our society teaches it, that we can kind of just are totally disconnected from our parents. It was kind of an accident that they ever were our parents to begin with. And there's no plan there, and I can do better by just going and being my own person completely separate from them. Whole generations in North America have grown up on that kind of idea, and it's wrong. It's godless, and it has nothing to do with the Bible. And many people look at the things their parents did wrong. All parents do stuff that's wrong. And many people have focused on that so much in our kind of victim mentality culture that we begin to despise our parents, maybe even especially when they're old. And this is a tragedy. It's a tragedy not only for them, it's a tragedy for us. Because if you despise your parents, you're going to miss out on the blessing. You're going to miss out on the promise that comes with this. It's a deep promise. You're not going to be able to be the person you were made to be unless you truly honor your parents from your heart. Also, many of our parents need help when they're old. And our society more and more has gone to, well, that's something for professionals to do. Okay? Now, it is not wrong to put your parents into a care home in certain situations. That's a decision you have to make at certain stages in life. But it is wrong to not care for your elderly parents. Even if they're in a care home, right? Even if you can't provide the main physical care that they need, honoring your parents means not despising them when they're old. And it means showing up. It means being there for them. It means doing whatever you can. You can't do everything. No one can. But it means you cannot just pretend oh yeah, they raised me and did all that for me, but no big deal. I'm just on my own now. Bye, guys. No. Honoring your parents means caring for them when they're old. This is a verse from 1 Timothy. If a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn, first of all, to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family. And so repaying their parents and grandparents for this is pleasing to God. I mean, even for those of you who are younger in here, I could, all the stuff that I just said for the last maybe 5 or 10 minutes, I could say we could also apply it to your grandparents. Because I know sometimes as a young person, it feels really hard to relate to your grandparents. But a way of following this commandment, if you're a older child, teenager, young adult, honor your grandparents. Go and listen to them, even if it's awkward and it doesn't always, sometimes it's hard or not the first thing you want to do. This will result in blessing for them and for you. It will result in blessing for you. And I think this is my final point on adults. Honor your parents by forgiving them. Honor your parents by forgiving them. And this gets to, I've said a number of times now, every parent makes mistakes. And so often, for many, many people, we have things that we are angry at our parents about that happened when we were young, or even when we're already adults. But for some people, this will even be the primary way of relating to their parents. Because some of us had parents who did not live out what they were supposed to be at all. It's rare, thankfully, by God's grace, but sometimes people have really bad, or even parents who actively went after evil in their parenting. And sometimes people like that say, well, how can I honor my parents? How can I honor my parents if my parents just hated God and did all this awful stuff and abused me and abused everyone around them and they're not even around anymore? You can honor your parents, first of all, by forgiving them. You can honor your parents by forgiving them. There is a very famous statement. It's a little bit older English now because it's from the 1500s. John Bradford, who was about my age when he was executed for his faith in Christ. He was in prison. This is a painting or a drawing of him in prison with some other church leaders in the 1500s in England. And as they were waiting for their execution, they were watching criminals be executed. And he made this famous statement, "There but for the grace of God go I." And what he meant was, fundamentally, in my own strength, I'm not really any better than that murderer who's being executed ahead of me. Now, John Bradford did not murder people in his life. He did amazingly good things. But he is crediting God with that. It's only because God came and helped me. And I was responsive. Yes, I accepted his help. But it's only because he helped me. Without his help, I would have gone down that wrong path. And we can say that, even those of us who had really terrible parents. There but for the grace of God go I. We'll finish up just talking about the promise for a minute, because this kind of wraps it together and brings into our minds and into our vision why we should follow this commandment. God is so gracious to us. In this case, in this particular command, and I think it's because of the kind of command it is, he doesn't just say do it. He actually tells us to a large degree why we need to do it. There's this promise attached to it. So here's the promise again. You're going to honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. There's so much in this commandment. So you're going to live a long time. It doesn't mean, it's not like a formula. It doesn't mean, he's not saying if you, just like, if you give money to the church, it doesn't mean you're going to become rich or that you'll never have issues with money. But it means, in general, God is going to bless you. And as a general rule, you are going to live an abundant and long life on the earth if you do this thing, if you honor your father and mother. So it's not a promise you're going to live to be 110, but it is a promise that your life is going to have a deep blessing on it. Your physical life on the earth, and also how you relate to other people, as we've already seen. But the question is why? Why is there a promise attached to this commandment, and how exactly does that work? Is it just like, is there some mechanism for this promise to happen? Or is it just that, if I honor my parents, then God just kind of zaps me with good blessings? Well, God certainly is in control over all of it. But there are some deep ways, because of our connection to our parents, that God has built it into the natural order of things, that if we honor our parents, our lives will go much, much better. And I'll say this just in a few points instead of taking a really long time to draw it out or to explain all of this. But who you are is deeply connected to your parents. Who you are is deeply connected to your parents. You did not choose your parents, but it was not an accident that they were your parents. And the things that you can't change about yourself, the things that are natural to you, and then no matter how hard you work, you can't really change them, most of those things are a direct result of your parents. Your height, your skin color, your ethnic background, how you were brought up in your younger years, all those came directly through your parents. And your parents were given to you by whom? By God. And so you are so deeply connected to them that if you don't honor your parents, it will be very hard for you to trust God. Do you see the connection? If you can't reach the point in your life where you forgive your parents and you see, even if they did things that were bad, you see the good thing God was trying to do by giving you those parents, even if it turned out badly. If you can't get to the point where you honor them in your heart, it will be very hard for you to trust God because God gave you those parents. If you deeply believe that the first thing God ever gave you was terrible and was an awful gift, how will you ever trust him? How will you believe that he's good? What did I say to this doctor? I said I would come back to it at the end. As I was in pain and he was asking me this question, my dad's about to die. I've been bitter and I've hated him my whole life. Okay, he didn't say it exactly like that, but this is what he meant. I've been bitter and hated him my whole life. I hate being around him. I can't even stand to go visit him. I do know him a little bit. Should I forgive him? Should I honor him? Well, I thought for a minute, and the pain was going into my body as he did his little procedure on me. And then after I stopped breathing so hard from the pain, I said to him something like this. I said, it is absolutely essential that you not only forgive your father, but you learn to view his life as God's blessing and gift to you. It's absolutely essential. It's helpful for your dad, but it's absolutely essential for you and for your life and for your relationship to the God who made you. If you cannot honor him, you will not trust God, and you will not be able to become the person God made you to be. So honor your father and your mother. Let's pray.